Hey, good morning. Welcome inside Mr. Small's Theater here in Millvale. I am Matt Geika, and you are listening to or watching Geik's Got Game. Thanks again to Alan Saunders for filling in for me last week as I was on vacation, our annual golf trip. My wife's family and I, they graciously tagged me along to, parts unknown. It used to be, at least, way up north in the state of Michigan, about an 8-hour drive. But I'm back and fully refreshed and invigorated and exhilarated to talk to you again for the first time in a couple of weeks. It's a jam-packed show, no guests. As usually happens when I take a week off from this thing, I have so much to say that I wonder, can I even squeeze it into the 10 o'clock hour? So I'll give it my best shot. If it doesn't work out, then I'll just bump a few things that are a little more evergreen to next week's program. But coming up in this program, things I can guarantee I will get to. The Pirates fan boycott. We've heard much chatter about that this year, right? People turning away from the ownership group, turning away from the team that they followed their entire lives. It's real, at least in one very obvious way, but it might not be terribly complete. And I'll tell you some information that I have, some hard data, not just feelings and emotions and that sort of thing. But I have some hard information on this boycott, the nature of it. Like I said, it's real, but it might not be fatal to the fates of the Pirates as a franchise, as an entertainment entity here in Pittsburgh. Also, the World Cup's over. Congratulations to France. I don't want to brag too much, but I called it after the quarterfinal round. I just saw too much quality on both ends of the pitch from the Frenchmen, the young Frenchmen. Very impressive Frenchmen. They got it done, their third World Cup, their first since 1998. They beat the upset-minded Croatian squad, and full marks to them. I was hoping for England in the final against France. That would have been something. But, oh well. France a deserving champion. But did you enjoy it? If you are a soccer fan, or maybe just getting casually interested in the sport, did you enjoy it more or less or about the same as compared to you did last time around when the U.S. men's national team was involved? This is the first World Cup for many of us, including myself, of a certain age. I'm 33. I don't remember the World Cup without the U.S. in it. But did that just spare us some frustration and some anger that we completely bypassed this time? We'll discuss that as well. Also, I want to talk about this past weekend for me and getting back into the spirit of competition as an amateur athlete and using that to help appreciate the athletes that we watch on a daily basis, whether it be individual or team sports. But I want to talk about the benefits of playing individual sports. That's later on in the hour. And a Brewers pitcher by the name of Josh Hader, one of the top pitchers in baseball, in fact, this year. He was an all-star, pitched in the all-star game this past Tuesday. But he's finding out the dangers of social media 7 years down the line. I want to ask, is there a statute of limitations on truly awful tweets? I'm not talking about bad jokes. I'm talking about tweets that reveal you to be flawed as a human being. If you looked into this, you probably know what I'm talking about, but I'll fill you in if you don't know that. That's all coming up later in the hour. Before I go any further, though, as I mentioned, this is Geik's Got Game, and this is now into my fourth year of doing this show. Not from up here at Mr. Small's Theater, but in general. We started off down the hill at Millvale Studios, now bumped up the hill, and happy to be here at this historic location in Pittsburgh entertainment and Pittsburgh music annals. Tyler Zelenko is my producer to my left. As I mentioned last week, Alan Saunders filled in for me. If you watched it or listened to it for the first time last week, Alan's a frequent guest on this program and a good buddy of mine and a colleague in many ways, and has been a colleague since I got back to Pittsburgh a few years ago. But usually, I don't want to call it a solo show, but usually it's my program. So I try to carry the thing through force of personality and hopefully through force of argument. You can find me on social media if you don't like it, if you want to give me some feedback. I'm on Twitter at Matt Geitka, MattGajtka, and if you are watching, you can see that little helpful label below my name because the last name is difficult to spell. Blame my Polish ancestors, I suppose. I'm also on Facebook at Matt Geitka Media, and many of you, in fact, access the show via my Facebook page. So thank you for doing that, and I would remind you, if you do access the show that way, make it a point to mosey on over to riversedgepgh.com. That is our hub for the audio stream, which is the backbone of what we do here. We have diversified into other mediums, of course, including Facebook. And we don't discriminate, but we want to make sure that you see all we have to offer there, including podcasts, including short videos that Tyler and others here at the station cut up into shorter, more digestible bits of the insight and observation that I offer here every week. And it's there for the Mike Sasson Show. It's there for Brian Crawford's River Talk. Again, all at riversedgepgh.com. Okay, let's get down to it. And the thing I want to open with is it's mid-July and getting into late July, on this July 20th, in fact. And we're in that time of the year where if you follow baseball, you start to wonder, is my team in it? Are they out of it? Are we going to make some trades? If we do make trades, are we going to sell or are we going to buy? Are we going to go all in on this year or are we going to punt the football down the road, to use a cross-sport metaphor? For the Pirates, I would still sell. I would still look ahead as opposed to this year, even after that exhilarating 5-game sweep against the Brewers at PNC Park. Yes, I said 5-game sweep. That's the first time in 12 years that Major League Baseball has had anything like that, because we don't see 5-game series that often. And to do that against the team that you're chasing in the NL Central, well, it all seems very familiar, doesn't it? The Pirates did that last year. I believe it was to the Brewers right before leaving on a long trip out west at the end of July, and the debate was very similar to this year. Well, they're right around 500. They're kind of in the race, and as I pull up the wild card standings, baseball getting back to it last night, the Pirates resume their post-break, or start their post-break portion of their schedule tonight at Cincinnati. Well, there's still several games out, and there's still, more importantly, several teams between them and that final playoff position. The Pirates, in fact, yeah, it's pretty ugly if you want to look at it that way. Even after going 8-2 in their past 10, even after winning 6 in a row going into the break, the Pirates are 5.5 games behind the Atlanta Braves for the second wild card spot in the National League. And count them up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams between them and the Braves. Arizona, Colorado, San Francisco, St. Louis, and Washington. And there's the chance of a good weekend at Cincinnati. The Pirates are better than the Reds. The Reds have been playing better since the start of the season. But there's a good chance in 3 more days we're saying, well, they just swept the Reds, or they just took 2 out of 3. Maybe they should go in. But looking at the standings, if you're playing the percentages, and I know it's tough to just take that emotion out of it, because if you're a Pirates fan, you're so desperate for some late season run. We haven't really seen that. We haven't seen them pull that off in the Clint Hurdle, Neil Huntington era. When they have made the playoffs, when they have been interesting, they have already been in a pretty good position at this point of the year. Even in 2014, when they used that scintillating September to fly into the postseason as the hottest team in the National League, they were still right there for the wild card, not 5.5 back. So I would expect the Pirates position for the future. They sell off some veterans, Josh Harrison, Jordy Mercer perhaps, maybe even Francisco Cervelli. Who knows? If they get crazy, they could move all 3 of them, and I wouldn't have an issue with that. But the issue around the Pirates this year has been much more existential from the fan point of view. And I talked to a friend of mine who watched every game last year, hasn't watched a game since April. He just felt like he was being swindled by the ownership group. He felt like they aren't really committing. And if you look at the payroll, it's hard to argue against that. I know that the Pirates don't make as much revenue compared to many, many other teams. We've talked about the inherent unfairness of Major League Baseball's economic system. However, there's definitely a case to be made. The Pirates could have gone further when they were in the playoffs to push that payroll up, to commit more money to the current, or to the team as it was in that moment. And you could say right now they're doing it on the cheap. And maybe it's frugal, maybe it's more prudent as a small market team to do that, but their whole pitch to the fan base was that we'll keep this competitive window open, and if things go right in a given year, we'll be in competition. Well, in 7 out of the 10 years that the Pirates have been under Neil Huntington, and to make it more fair, we'll call it, 3 out of the last 6, the last 3 consecutively, they since they have built the team up, they have not been in a good spot. So I feel like the Pirates management group hasn't delivered on that from a baseball standpoint. Forget all the financial stuff. Forget the Bob Nutting hatred if you have it, and I'm not going to blame you if you do. But from a baseball operation standpoint, they just haven't delivered in that way either. So you could say it's time to change leadership. I wouldn't argue with you there. But most fans have had an issue with continuing to give money to this team. And if you look at if you just watch these games at PNC Park, you look at the year-over-year difference in attendance, the Pirates are bottom 5 in baseball, or top 5 if you want to look at it that way. They're not the Miami Marlins, who are down 11,000 per game from last year, and the Marlins just gutted everything again. If there is one fan base that's more tortured than the Pirates, it's the Miami Marlins, although they also have 2 World Series in the past 20 years, or 21 years. So the Pirates fans would certainly, I think they would trade positions, at least in that case, even though their ownership down in Miami seems to be the absolute worst, and it has been the Pits for a long time. But Toronto's down 10,000, Detroit's down 7,000, Kansas City down nearly 7,000, and the Pirates down 6,700 per game. So the fans have spoken. They've checked out. I've noticed, just anecdotally speaking on social media, that there's just not that buzz. It's more just, they'll never compete. They're not committing. I'm not going to pay attention. Admittedly, that's not the hard data that I promised, but being in the top 5 in drops in attendance from 17 to 18, that's pretty damning. But Frank Coonelly, the Pirates president, just the previous week, said that fans haven't checked out on the team. And I was like, what is he talking about? The attendance is way down. But he was looking at local ratings on AT&T Sportsnet Pittsburgh, and the numbers that are out there reported by Forbes magazine last week, as they always are at the All-Star break. Believe this or not, the Pirates, despite being under 500 for a lot of the first half of the season, despite being really out of it for the past 8 weeks or so, they have the 6th best local rating in all of Major League Baseball. They trail the Cardinals, the Indians, the Red Sox, the Brewers, and the Royals. And if you look at those teams, they all have either had most recently great success in the terms of the Royals, 2015 World Series champions, of course, 2014 pennant winners. The Cardinals, they're always in it, even though they're a little bit down this year. The Indians have made the World Series recently. The Red Sox are always good. They're among the best teams in baseball this year. And the Brewers, good last year and looking like a possible playoff team this year. All those teams ahead of the Pirates have given their fans more reason to tune in, but the Pirates, with a local rating of 5.01, that means 5% of all local televisions on a given night are tuned into the Bucco game. That's 6th best in the big leagues, despite having the 5th largest drop in attendance. So what that says is fans who have already paid for their cable packages, presumably, are saying, all right, I'm not going to go to the game. I'm not going to give Bob Nutting my money that way. But I am going to still stay at least somewhat engaged with the squad. And it's tough to look at those TV numbers and say that fans have totally lost interest in the Pirates. So maybe my confirmation bias is getting in the way here in terms of social media, like I talked to you about, or I write occasionally a column for Pirates Prospects, and Tim Williams over at that site. His subscription numbers are down, so people are disengaging with their pocketbooks. But when it's a sunk cost, like your cable package, people still don't mind moseying on over on the dial to check out the Pirates game. So it's really interesting to me, and I think that's ultimately promising for the Pirates. And I'm not sure if I felt that it was proper for Frank Coonelly to say, hey, fans are still locked in, they're just not at the ball game. Well, not being at the ball game is a big deal because attendance does give you money directly if you are a Major League Baseball franchise, and it gets more people in the stands exposed to your product, which I think is better live than it is on TV. But I felt like that was a little bit whistling past the graveyard for Frank Coonelly. It's not a great scene at PNC Park right now. Maybe if the Pirates have a couple of back-to-back strong years, they can get that attendance back up in the 30,000 range where it was in 2015 and 2016, that after effect, of course, people paying and buying tickets for the following season after they see a great season the previous year. But the Pirates now down, in the 23,000 range for average attendance, or pardon me, that was last year. They're now below 20,000. And in fact, 4th from the bottom, 18,000. So they've dropped more than 10,000 over 3 years. That's a big problem. That's a big hemorrhage of money. But I do agree with Frank Coonelly in one way, even though I didn't really think it was necessary to talk about it in these terms. It felt like he was just saying, we're fine, everything's good. I disagree with that, but long term, I don't think this fan boycott will be fatal to the franchise because people are still interested in the Pirates. Now, there's a big leap from being interested in just indulging in watching a ball game on a summer's evening and making the leap in buying tickets, buying merchandise, and contributing to the Pirates' coffers in that way. So there's still a big leap to make, but I don't think, compared to where I was about 5 or 6 weeks ago when I thought maybe the Pirates, who knows, might not even be here this was just a few weeks ago when I discussed it on this show, the lease at PNC Park runs out in 2030. So there's no guarantee the Pirates don't leave for greener pastures. We've seen it in Major League sports, no matter the league, and no matter the time frame, and no matter how great the ballpark is or how great the stadium is. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a long shot that the Pirates ever leave town, but with attendance being as low as it is, I'm sure that stray thought has probably come into ownership's mind as you look way down the line, 12 years down the line here. But even in the short term, it felt like the Pirates have dropped to minor league status. But you look at the ratings, and people are still tuning in. Now, ratings can be off, sample size limitations being what they are. It's not a true measure, but at least via the scientific process here that is Nielsen ratings, a 5% share in a market is huge in terms of Major League Baseball. And it's not Penguins numbers. It's certainly not Steelers numbers for a big game. But the Pirates are still in people's minds. And if there's one silver lining to take out of it, even if it's just a hate watch on your part out there, the Pirates are still part of the conversation. So for me, as someone who works in sports media, I've often questioned, should I even talk about the Pirates? Do people even care about the Pirates right now? Well, the TV rating does tell me that you are still out there, even though you may be angry as hell and completely pissed off about the direction of the franchise. So, if we may put aside all the discussions, esoteric as they are, about the trade deadline, are they buyers, are they sellers, should they sell, should they buy? Right now, people are still buying the Pirates as a viable Major League sports entity. And that's something that at least mildly surprised me in that degree, being the sixth best rating in all of Major League Baseball. Does that surprise you? It did me. Let me know how you feel. Maybe you're one of those fans who just isn't going to the game, but you're still watching. Or maybe you're like my friend who I just spoke about, who is just disengaging completely. So love to hear back from you, either on Facebook or Twitter. This is Gike's Got Game on the River's Edge. This has been the first period. We're moving on to the intermission and to the second period of play. And we're going to talk about the Men's World Cup just passed. Did you watch? Did you care? Did you care more with the U.S. out of it? Did you just enjoy it more? I think I actually did, not to give away too much for next segment, but that'll be our following topic. Also, we're talking about Brewers pitcher Josh Hader and his completely toxic tweets that were uncovered this week from 7 years ago when he was 17 and 18 years old. Is that long enough, though, to forgive? If you're a Brewers fan, if you're a fan of baseball, if you're a fan of professional sports, what is that statute of limitations? So we'll get into that. We'll get into football invading, unfortunately, into our summer sports bubble, and a little bit more. Who knows what we have time for. On the River's Edge, coming up a little bit from now.
You didn't wash your hands! People who do not wash their hands should be fined. And I'm sorry, I don't know about all of you, but if you're gonna castrate me, you might as well just kill me! So enjoy your hot dog, you jackass!
Get educated with Brian Crawford live Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 10 a.m. here on the River's Edge.
Hey, welcome back inside Mr. Small's Theater. This is Gike's Got Game on the River's Edge. I am Matt Geica. Tyler Zelenko is alongside, pushing all the buttons and keeping us on the air, and it's very much appreciated because, let's just say I've engineered this show solo, and it wasn't as high quality as it is when someone else handles it. Yeah, it's tough to talk and think about tech at the same time, at least for me. I, again, am a broadcast commentator, you could call me that, on this radio station for the past 3 years, like I was saying. We just celebrated our third anniversary. At least I did on my program. Brian Crawford, one of the owners here, along with Sarah Kramer, they are the proprietors here, and Brian's been on the air with River Talk since the station was located in his closet just up the road here. So, yeah, we've been at it for a while. We continue to pick up more and more listeners. We continue to also sponsor more and more events. The Millvale Music Fest is past for this year, but it was a raging success, and we'll continue to have more enriching events, more opportunities for you to get to know your Millvale community. This is a hot place in the general Pittsburgh realm, in the Pittsburgh area. Millvale is definitely percolating, I would say. And I checked out that food truck park, a couple of weeks ago. I took a walk down by the Allegheny with my family, and that is a hidden gem if you haven't taken a look at that. So we're up here on the hill, so we get a chance to overlook Millvale, and thank God the rains have stopped. Last time I was in here, I was wondering if I were even going to be able to make it up the hill because of how much I think it's Gertie's Run down here was overflowing its banks, and hope all the folks who had all that water in their basements and in their front yards have been able to repair things. In fact, speaking of that, I'm getting some waterproofing done up on the hill. I'm in Westview, and it's been a wild summer for torrential downpours, and we're taking some precautionary measures now. Myself and my wife Jillian, if she is watching right now. What's going on over there? I hope that all the work that needs to be done is getting done. That's always a helpless feeling, right? When you hire out a contractor, and I'm by no means Mr. Handyman, but it's always more comforting when you do it yourself. But to waterproof a basement, that's a little above my pay grade and my level of experience. Anyway, neither here nor there. I got a comment on Facebook from Pat Clark. We were talking about the Buccos and how local TV ratings are still surprisingly strong considering the state of the team, considering how many people are just so mad about the Pirates. Put Pat Clark in that latter category. He says, I could care less about the Pirates, and it's because of ownership and the way that it's run. Bring on Steeler and Penguin season. Well, don't worry. Steeler season's coming faster than we might be hoping. I always hate this time of the year, first of all, because I see the media days for college football conferences. And Larry Fedora, the head coach of the University of North Carolina's football team, he said something ridiculous the other day. I was talking about this on ESPN Pittsburgh in my guest spot with Adam Crowley, good buddy of mine. And we were discussing how Fedora said that he feels like football is America's last chance to still be a strong nation or some nonsense like that. And we've heard similar statements from Jim Harbaugh, the completely bonkers head coach of the University of Michigan. These guys think that football is the only way to get tough, or for men to be men, and for quality character in our young people. There are other ways to build character. I was just talking about individual sports, and I will be in just a little bit about how that can help you learn a lot about yourself. I'm so glad I played golf and tennis as a kid coming up, because it's just on you. I think that was just as seminal of a moment in my development as a young person as anything out there. And I would have, and I appreciated it more than when I even played team sports, because it taught individual accountability and responsibility. Not that you don't get that in team sports, and it's important to be a part of the team too, but the idea that football, because it's so rough and tough and we got to punch these guys in the mouth, because that's the only way to build self-esteem, to build confidence, to build accountability and responsibility, and all those platitudes sometimes, but they're real values too. I completely disagree with that fact. In fact, there are many more responsible ways, if you are a parent and you want your kid to build some character, than to put them into football. You can still play a physical sport. You can play a sport like hockey even. You can play a sport like lacrosse. These are sports with physical contact if you desire that. Rugby, for goodness sake. But based on the data, they are sports that are safer on aggregate, not just for your brain, but also for your body and your long-term health. So football is not the one true sport. And we always get this proselytizing from coaches, and media day is a great time of the year for them to do that, because training camps are starting and they have the bully pulpit in front of the collected media. And most of the media laps this up, of course, because they love football if they're covering it. For the most part, they do. And we can afford to push back on that thought that football is the only way to get it done. But anyway, we're about to be inundated with football talk. We already are, with Le'Veon Bell and his contract negotiations with the Steelers. If you watch this show, I don't talk a lot of Steelers. I don't talk a lot of American football, at least. But I do talk a lot about world football, and we're transitioning now to that. Enough about the oblate spheroid. Let's go on to just that plain old sphere that every nation in the world plays, a sport that I think can bring us closer together as a world, because we all care about it in varying quantities and qualities. And the World Cup has just passed. As I said, congrats to France. I would have hoped maybe Belgium or England would have pulled it off. Those were my adopted teams after my beloved Poland dropped out in the first round, as we usually do. And like I said, no U.S. men's national team to cheer for. I postulated before the tournament even started that maybe this will be better. Maybe we will enjoy this even more, or maybe I will enjoy this even more. And some of you might have thought, well, that's crazy, because don't you want a rooting interest? Well, yeah, I do, but I also found it more enriching from a world perspective. From my fandom, overall fandom as a soccer follower, I found it more enriching this way, because I was forced to learn more about other teams. It wasn't just all about, when's America playing next? How can we adjust from match to match? Can we make the knockout round? Can we advance further than we ever have? Well, and the answer to all those questions was no. There wasn't even no. It was N/A, not applicable in this case because America wasn't involved. So I had to maybe not necessarily adopt other teams outside of Poland because of my heritage, but I had to look into other teams and see who was stronger. Not that I wouldn't handicap the field when America was in it, but this was just from a purely appreciation of the sport point of view. And I found it a little bit more refreshing, not because I don't like the emotional highs and lows of pulling for a team, and I've talked about how I think that is a worthwhile endeavor, and it's fun to put your heart and soul into something, even if you have absolutely no control over it. But I think that is good for the soul in some ways. But I think also, in this case, it was more intellectually satisfying and also just more thrilling to ride and be able to, even if something completely abysmal happened, even if there was some big mistake from a goalkeeper or some big coverage mistake from a back line or a striker missed a wide open chance, you could at least say, wow, that's quite a relief for the other team without having to be like pulling your hair out and chewing your nails because the team that you're rooting for is directly involved. So you could keep more of an even keel, or at least I could. And at the same time, I could choose also to just enjoy all the highlights and enjoy all the great football that was being played. And for me, that just came easier because there was no rooting interest. So perhaps in the future, if, say, the Penguins don't make the Stanley Cup playoffs, or, well, I'm used to this from the baseball perspective because the Pirates are very rarely involved in the postseason there. If you're an NFL fan, the Steelers almost always are in it. So maybe that affects your ability to enjoy the tournament in that way. But I would suggest at least once, even if you're the type of person who feels like they need to have a rooting interest, I would suggest once to just go into there completely detached and objective and just be able to take it all as joy and all as a fulfilling experience. To just watch this, let it wash over you, and not have your blood pressure rise and fall. Now, I will admit, when you don't allow yourself to experience the lows, the highs aren't quite as high either. So there is a give and take, but at least in that way, I did not mind after I got over the complete distress of seeing the U.S. fall out of the world stage in that way. After I got past that, I found it a very productive experience, a very enjoyable experience in a lot of ways, once I just put it out of my mind completely that the U.S. was an entity that is to be followed. Now we're past the World Cup, and the thoughts are, how do we get back into this thing from a men's perspective? And of course, next year, less than a year away, will be the Women's World Cup, where we are almost always right there at the top. So if you want that rooting interest, the U.S. Women's National Team will be there to bail all of us out in about 11 months. This is Gike's Got Game on the River's Edge. Second period's over with. On to the third. Coming up next, I want to talk about social media. I want to talk about also you as the sports viewer and why I think it's important for all of us to get involved in the competition, to be that man or woman in the arena, to use that Teddy Roosevelt quote, and to actually put something on the line ourselves. It's a theme I've talked about and I've touched upon on this show previously, but I want to get more into that, and that'll be on the other side of this break on the River's Edge.
According to the Oxford Dictionary, the word jagoff is defined as a noun, which means a stupid, irritating, or...
John and Rachel from the Jagoff podcast, and we are at the River's Edge.
And starting on 7/5, we will be here every Thursday at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Right, so that means like we are at the River's Edge.
Right.
Here, we're inside your little computer, and we're talking all about the cool things going on in Pittsburgh.
All things Pittsburgh.
Yep.
Listen in Thursdays at 10.
Tiger Woods even par through 2 rounds of the Open Championship. Yeah, if you know me, I'm paying attention. And, well, could be worse. Could be better, but could be worse. It's been an interesting year in following Tiger. And, you know, I love golf. I play golf. And the reason I play golf, part of the reason is because of the emergence of Tiger Woods in the late 90s when I was a kid. So, yeah, I'm one of those still hanging on to every swing and every stroke of the putter. And, like I said, it could be worse, could be better. He made the cut, so that'll be fun following things over the weekend from Carnoustie in Scotland, and that's a place I'd love to get to. Not Carnoustie in general, the golf course, but just Scotland and St. Andrews, if I had to be picky, so-called home of golf, and the place that the Open Championship returns every 5 years or so. So that's on the bucket list, and I would love to play the course, don't get me wrong, but just walking it would be something else. And it's been Well, it's always the time of the year for individual sports, right? And that's why I love the summer, because it's a good palate cleanser from all the team-oriented stuff that we talk about all year long. And, we just had Wimbledon. We had, if you're a tennis fan, you had the French Open before that. We've had the U.S. Open in golf. We have the Open Championship here from Scotland, as it usually is. So it's a time to follow from that perspective. And I understand that people aren't quite as passionate about the individual sports as they are about team sports. It's easier to cheer for team sports, I find, just because there's a little more of that tribalism factor. And, just generally speaking, it just seems like people like team sports better. I'm not sure why. I'm more even. In fact, sometimes I feel like I'm more of an individual sports type of a fan, just because I relate to it, because I played it growing up. And here we are back on Guy's Got Game. Much of my perspective is often informed, as all of our perspectives are, by my individual personal experience. And as a sports commentator, as a member of the media for a while now, as someone who has try to be at least a connoisseur in some ways, right? That's how I market myself on social and out there in the world. And that's how I try to derive some value from the talents that I was born with and the skills that I've developed here, especially in terms of language and using it. But I put myself on that pedestal. I think we all do as sports fans. We say, we're a diehard sports fan, or I'm getting into it, I'm learning more about it. And so we build up that authority, right? But none of us, assuming we're physically able to play some sort of a sport, I think none of us should totally back out of the participation sphere. I think there's a lot of spectating that goes on, and there is enjoyment that can come from spectating. I was just talking about it in regards to the World Cup, of course, and how we can have that vicarious joy. But there's nothing like putting yourself on the line and participating yourself and being a competitor. And I haven't taken my own advice in recent years. I used to play competitive golf. I used to basically sign up for tournaments. I used to play on a junior tour in my home state of West Virginia in the summer, 3 or 4 events between the end of school and the start of school, between the end of school and the start of golf season, which it was competitively for us in West Virginia in the fall. That used to be a major part of my life, and I used to play hockey in a men's league. That's a little bit tougher since I was working in hockey now. So what I do is just play in a regular pickup game on Friday nights out at Robert Morris University Island Sports Center, and that's a lot of fun. But from an individual perspective, like I was saying, the accountability factor, the individual responsibility, I think it's great life lessons you can learn from that. But just generally competing, and as I come back from our family's annual golf trip, we compete pretty hard. And congrats to my wife, Jillian, by the way, for winning the first handicap-adjusted Heron Family Invitational. So making it more fair from that side of things. And Jillian outperformed her usual by more than everybody else. I was honored to come in second to her. So a 1-2 finish for the Geica family. That was pretty awesome. But that trip every year reminds me of how much I miss competing on more of a regular basis. And just yesterday, I put my money where my mouth was. I signed up for an official USGA handicap, and what that does is it allows you to play in USGA-sanctioned tournaments and also other tournaments that factor in handicap. And all a handicap is how many strokes over par you usually are. There are some other calculations thrown in there that adjust it downward a bit, but if you're not a golf fan, if you're not a golfer, you don't know what a handicap is. That's all it is. It's a judge of your ability level, at least over your past 20 rounds of golf. That's where that calculation comes from. But this annual golf trip, it functions as one of my lone instances of legit athletic competition over a given year. That's something I'm trying to change, like I said, but for me, it's a reminder of how important it is for all of us to put something on the line, to experience that if you are a sports fan especially, because I'm a big believer in participation, if nothing else, than to increase the empathy that we have for the athletes that we watch. So often, and I'm guilty too, we criticize and we throw darts at the men and women in the arena, to borrow a line from Teddy Roosevelt, but we forget how difficult some of this stuff really is. And their level of ability is way past where most of ours is, so they should have higher expectations, and we can have standards based on the competition at the highest level to say, okay, that was good, or that was bad, or that was below average, or that was above average. So nothing wrong with that, but it's, again, I talk about the soul, I talk about being a sports citizen as opposed to just a sports fan. and this is nothing that I haven't chatted about on this program before, but boy, does it get reinforced when I put myself out there in competition. So my suggestion to you, and it's a great time to do this in the summer, is to compete in some form or fashion if you have the opportunity. Like I said, some of us don't have the time or the inclination or the disposable income or really the athletic ability. But if you do have some modicum of it, and I think most of us do in some way or in some specialty, and especially in the individual sports, there's so much to be learned about yourself in that arena. And that's a tough thing to keep in mind for me when my job is, as it has been for the past 3 years, especially in the Pittsburgh realm, to analyze and to break down everything athletes and teams do. And it's nothing against, like I said, team sports, which can be fabulous from a recreational perspective. I've loved playing slow pitch softball in the past too. But the individual onus of sports like golf or tennis or running, which I'm trying to re-engage into tonight, in fact. I'm a nervous boy today because I'm running in the Liberty Mile, my first mile race. That'll be a quick pace. That's just downtown here in Pittsburgh. So that sort of thing leaves it all on you. You have to do the preparation. You can't lean on a teammate, and there's no one to blame when things go wrong other than yourself, but also no one to credit but yourself when things go right. And if I must confess, I haven't been the best team player at times, whether we're talking about work or play. I'd rather get frustrated with myself, frankly, than upset with somebody else. But even though I like people, I still feel like I lean more toward the individual side of things. That's just how my personality is tailored here. That's just how I've been wired since birth, I think. But that doesn't mean that team sports can't have some value there. I'm just saying get out there and participate. Get out there and give yourself some stakes. And you don't have to be like me from an individual perspective to appreciate that level of pressure, that anxiety, that exhilaration that comes from participation. So like I said, I'm trying to follow up my brave words with actions, with getting a USGA handicap for the first time, and I think it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I'm not sure how long it's been since I've had a real handicap. So that increases your accountability. That lets you know, oh, these are real results. I think it puts a little bit more on you. It gives you a little more action if you're into that sort of thing from a mental standpoint. And I'm actively looking for golf tournaments, for more races to get into from a running perspective. It's all something that I'm going to try to stay accountable with you, the viewer and the listener. And I hope maybe you can perhaps get spurred on by this and say, yeah, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to experience this for real. Because like I said last segment, when you just take a step back and you're a spectator, yeah, the lows aren't as low, but the highs aren't as high. And the benefits aren't as great when you're not directly participating. So get in there. Get in the arena. That's my encouragement for you here in this third period today on Gike's Got Game. Okay, coming up, as promised, a little social media discussion before we go pertaining to a prominent MLB pitcher, and then I'll sign off for the week. That's on the other side of this break. From Mr. Small's Theater here in Millvale, this is Gike's Got Game, broadcasting proudly on the River's Edge.
Hey folks, it's Mike Sasson of The Mike Sasson Show. Me and Alex, my producer extraordinaire, looked at the landscape of internet radio and figured if we want to make it, we've got to work. At least an hour earlier. Now on at 9 a.m. every Tuesday on the River's Edge, a new kind of radio.
Loving the interaction on Facebook today. This is Gike's Got Game on the River's Edge and broadcasting on Facebook Live in addition to our audio stream at riversedgepgh.com. Not a lot of hockey talk today, so I apologize for that, but this is the dead time, really. And while I still expect the Penguins to make some sort of trade, I really do. I felt like Jim Rutherford hinted at it pretty strongly a couple of weeks ago, in fact, after the signings of Jack Johnson and Matt Cullen. But not a lot to get into today. Jake Neal, a good friend of mine, chimes in on the Facebook wall. And like I said, loving the interaction. He wanted to know about the Penguins' latest signing. They've signed a lot of forwards. They've added a lot of forwards. There's a lot of depth at that position. Maybe more relevant to Wilkes-Barre, Scranton than Pittsburgh in some cases, but as I suggested to Jake, go over to Pittsburgh Hockey Now. Dan Kingerski had that covered for you over there, PittsburghHockeyNow.com, your suggested source for all Pittsburgh hockey news and opinion, even in the dead time in the calendar for the NHL. And as Jake reminded me, I played in a roller hockey league for the first time last year. I was talking about participation and he says I've got a sick toe drag. I'm not sure about that. I can shoot the puck a little bit, and, well, I like to at least get up and down the rink. Try to stay in good enough shape, so at bare minimum, I can at least get to the spots I need to get to. Now, if I can do the things that I want to do with the puck in those spots, sometimes that's a touch-and-go situation. But anyway, that was a lot of fun last year down at Alpha Ice Complex and also Roller Complex in the summer in Harmerville, the old Blade Runners, if you're familiar with the Pittsburgh area and playing at the various rinks. I brought up the RMU Island Sports Center. I'm biased because I worked for RMU, but that's always a favorite too. And it's, I think, the closest rink for me from where I live up here on the Parkway North, just past WPXI at the top of the hill on Perryville Highway. So, Perrysville Highway, pardon me. We're nearing the finish line here on Geiks Got Game, just a couple of minutes to go. I'm just happy to make it physically. The last 2 weeks, since the last time I spoke with you, basically, I've been fighting this upper respiratory infection, a.k.a. a cold. I like to make it sound bigger than it is. But I'm just happy. A week ago, I was in bed with a fever, wondering if I was even going to get to play golf with my family. I was laying in our cabin up there in northern Michigan, wondering if my body was quitting on me. I don't get sick that often, but it seems like when it does happen, it takes a while to clear my system. And especially in the summertime, this is awful. You want to be outside, but I really haven't been able to. But I feel like I'm finally breaking through this thing, and I was coughing up all sorts of fun stuff. But today, the voice is good, which I was worried about. And even after attending last night's Foo Fighters concert at PPG Paints Arena and screaming my head off along with Dave Grohl, maybe not at that level. Dave Grohl is a marvel of vocal cords, let me tell you that, and energy overall. But I was a little worried about holding up throughout the duration of this broadcast. But I made it this far. You are in overtime on Geiks Got Game. And I mentioned the interaction on Facebook Live. Also, pretty good viewership numbers throughout the hour. So that's been fantastic. Thanks for finding us there. And I, again, beseech you to head on over to riversedgepgh.com for podcasts, for short videos from these shows. It's all there in addition to our 24-hour radio stream. Well, it was a thoroughly modern sports story, as I put a bow on this show for this week. It was a thoroughly modern sports story from the MLB All-Star Game this week, as Milwaukee Brewers pitcher Josh Hader, one of the toughest guys to hit if you're a left-handed batter in Major League Baseball this year, a guy with great hair, who obviously I care about that. It's pulled back today, but don't worry, I haven't cut the mane off. Josh Hader for the Brewers, a big reason why they've been so successful. He's been a great pitcher out of the bullpen for Milwaukee the last 2 years. But literally, as he was pitching in the MLB All-Star Game, tweets were uncovered. I'm not sure who did the uncovering, but someone looked way back, did a deep search on Josh Hader's Twitter timeline, and found some rather disturbing posts, in fact, from Josh Hader from 7 and 8 years ago when he was 17 and 18 years old. And I've been on record as saying, even when I was 24 and 25, I don't think I was ready for certain things in life. I'm not sure I would have handled opportunities in the proper way back then. In fact, I know for a fact I didn't handle certain opportunities both professionally and personally the right way when I was sub 25. It's almost like a switch flips. And I think there's some data to back that up, at least from the standpoint of the male brain, that you finally mature when you get past that age. So 17 and 18, yeah, we've all said and maybe written some dumb things. In the case of Josh Hader, it was some anti-gay tweets. In fact, one that just out said, I hate gay people. There was a tweet about just one that said KKK, and one that was inflammatory, well, plenty that were inflammatory toward African Americans, including using the N-word in a derogatory fashion. Some pretty ugly stuff, and not stuff that we haven't found in athletes' accounts in the past, but there was a lot of it, and it seemed to run so counter to the image that Josh Hader has cultivated, maybe not consciously, but just the person that he has appeared to be, and in talking to or in hearing from some of his teammates at the All-Star Game, and now with the Brewers getting back to action in the regular season. In fact, there was an article on the athletic.com from Robert Murray discussing just this matter with people from all backgrounds in that Brewers clubhouse. They still feel like Josh owes them some sort of an apology, especially if you are a black man, and heaven forbid if you are a gay man in the closet in that clubhouse. You have to be wondering, right? Because even though that's a long time ago, 7 or 8 years, is there a statute of limitations for social media? I'm not sure. Maybe that's a lesson for all of us right now. But not to put myself on a pedestal, but I know for a fact I never tweeted anything that hateful or that derogatory toward other human beings, and I'm hoping that you're in that category too. Maybe you're not. Maybe you were angry about something as a youngster or as a younger person, and you put stuff out there that you'd rather have back. For me, this is a bit of an insight right into Josh Hader's innermost being, and maybe he has gotten rid of all those feelings, and he's greatly matured as a human being. But at the very least, I do feel like he owes more to his teammates, especially his black teammates, than he said at the All-Star game, saying that he was a different person back then. Well, if that's inside you at some level, and if it is that much of a repeated offense in the case of Josh Hader, then I don't think there is a statute of limitations on ugliness expressed on social media or in other formats. We shouldn't give him a pass even if he was 17 or 18. That's past the age of cognition. Even if we have maturing to do, a lot of it to do in some of our cases, past that age, it's still something that I think even if you are 24, 25, 26, maybe even more than a decade down the line, you should have to apologize for, and you should have to explain to your teammates, even if it's a white teammate who this doesn't apply to at all, you should have to explain that you've moved on. Just for the common courtesy, just to eliminate that possible rift that could develop between yourself and other human beings in that clubhouse who you go into intense athletic competition with 162 times a year. So I'm not one to tell people what to do, but if I were advising Josh Hader, I'd say, yeah, you owe a lot to your teammates, and you probably should go into that sensitivity training that I think MLB is mandating for Josh Hader. And it's not good enough to just say, I'm different now. If that's in there in any form or fashion, and it has come out publicly, then you have to make some amends. So I'm glad to see that MLB is pushing that, and it seems like the Milwaukee Brewers and their general manager, David Stearns, put out a comment to this effect. It seems like they are going to enforce that with Josh Hader. I'm not saying he's a bad guy, but you have to be accountable for your actions in this case. And it's my hope that Hader does do that. It seems like he's on track, and there is a lot more to be done than just say, that isn't me now. You have to apologize, and there are amends to be made in this case. So, to answer my own question, I don't think there is a statute of limitations on truly awful tweets like those, inflammatory, discriminatory, and out-and-out hateful. I don't want to put any kind of a lipstick on that pig, because it's pretty ugly stuff that we saw on Josh Hader's Twitter timeline. Like I said, a thoroughly modern story. In the past, it would have been something when he's a late teenager that he would just say or even think and then move on from, and he wouldn't have to be held accountable for it. But here we are in this age, and I don't think there's any avoiding that Josh Hader has to overcome this in some form or fashion. That's it for this week's Geiks Got Game. Thanks for sticking with me for the entire hour, all three periods plus the overtime. That's the usual format here on this program. Thanks to Tyler Zelenko, pride of Burgettstown, PA, to my left, stage right, for producing this show throughout. And thank you to you for patronizing the River's Edge, for listening and watching each and every week if you do. This is Matt Geica reminding you that when the radio fades, you know life's moving fast. It's been my honor to spend this past hour with you, and I hope to do so again next week, God willing. God bless, and I'll talk to you again next week. Have a great weekend.